all for coming today. I am super excited to have been asked by NC Live to participate in the e-resources learning series. I do have a deep and abiding affection for what NC Live does for libraries in North Carolina. And I love that this series is a partnership with consortia across the country. So a big thank you also to Carly and Lewis for hosting this, as well as for all the ways you support librarians and libraries. And thanks again to Devin for her organizational and technical skills and for keeping me on track as we planned this. So before we begin, I would love to do a quick poll to see what kind of libraries y'all are coming from.
All right, it seems like all but 5 have responded, all but 3 people, so I'll end that poll.
All right, academic library as well, me too. So, but I welcome everyone. And like I said, I'm really glad that you all are here. So, getting started, I would also like to read a land acknowledgement. Even though this session is virtual, I still think it's important to acknowledge that we work on land that was and still is home to many Indigenous peoples. UNCW's official land acknowledgement statement is being revised. So I've taken some wording from one written by one of our academic departments. And that says that we acknowledge with gratitude that the land we are on was originally stewarded by Indigenous peoples, including the Blackamoss Siouan tribe. We honor and respect the Indigenous peoples connected to this land. We continue to consciously reflect on the history and legacy of colonialism and reflect on ways to strengthen relationships with the many Indigenous people who presently live and work in the region and in the state. And there are some resources listed here to learn more about Indigenous peoples and their land. And I also like to suggest that when and where you can, please consider donating time or money. I borrowed that language from the North Carolina Serials Conference this year. And all of these links these are all hyperlinked for you to explore later. So as Devin mentioned, I am Sarah Mueth, and I am the Electronic Resources and Serials Librarian at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. On any given day, you will find me troubleshooting electronic resources, error reports in one of many campus or library committee meetings, working in Sierra or Serial Solutions, compiling usage statistics, or any number of activities, because I wear many hats and I don't know that I've ever had what I would call a typical day. This is a picture of my partner, Mike, and me. That's me on the right. We like to travel, and we took this picture in Portland, Maine, near Casco Bay on a brutally hot day this past July. Prior to working at UNCW, I was the Electronic Resources and Web Projects Administrator at the University of Illinois Springfield. So I like to give a little shout out to the Carly Libraries, which is where my electronic resources journey began. Librarianship is a second career for me. I previously worked in restaurant and retail management and at nonprofits, but for a long time, nothing really seemed to fit. I always thought about being a librarian though. So in 2011, I applied to library school, and in 2013, I graduated with my MLS. When I was in school, I put myself on a track to be a reference and instruction librarian. I took classes in collection development, instruction, reference, and I truly enjoyed them all. My first few library jobs were in instruction and user services, and I was able to put my academic training and years of customer service to good use. But all of that didn't really seem to fit either. So when an electronic resources job came open at my library, I felt compelled to apply and see what it was all about. And I honestly have never looked back. It was a little rough at first because all of my experience with databases and link resolvers and easy proxy authentication had been on the user end. And as you all know, learning how to talk about and troubleshoot these things is essentially learning a new language. But now finding resolutions to access problems and making sure the resources we pay lots of money for are findable are some of my favorite things to do. I feel like I found my stride with talking to vendors, which was tough because I tend to be an introvert. But that's also part of the reason why technical services work has appealed to me. But I truly enjoy what I do, and I like to nerd out a little bit when I get a chance to talk about my job. So I titled my presentation, No Electronic Resources Librarian is an Island, because as the session synopsis says, the phrase electronic resources can inspire awe, confusion, and sometimes fear. I know I've experienced all of those emotions, and even as what I like to say, I'm a veteran-ish electronic resources librarian, I still sometimes have those feelings. So today I want to show you that while the work can seem daunting, it's also satisfying, interesting, sometimes fun, and that you're not alone. It's my hope that this will be a candid and lighthearted and useful conversation about getting acclimated. And maybe there will be a few reminders for those of you who aren't so new. So as I was trying to get my bearings and decide what to talk about, I found this article in Library Technology Reports, and this paragraph stood out. And it says, an obvious and direct effect of the increasing availability of electronic resources in library collections was and still is the need to control and manage them. As simple as this task may sound, we as librarians and library professionals are still trying, more than a decade after the appearance of these electronically based resources, to find ways to administer these resources with the same comprehensive efficiency as we accomplished with print resources, all with new sets of tools and skills specifically tailored to the resources themselves and the new services these resources create. So, question for you all. Would anyone like to guess when this article was written? You can put it in chat or shout it out. So it was written in 2006. Some people were right on the head. Got that date right there. Now when I forgot, I was going to advance my slide here. My apologies. So these were the things though that stuck out to me in that paragraph: was increasing availability, need to control and manage, new tools and skills, efficiency, and still trying. So we have this nearly 17-year-old article lamenting the 10 years of challenges librarians have been facing in managing electronic resources, and we're still talking about electronic resources in those same terms today. So what is it that makes electronic resources work so difficult? For one thing, I don't think very many of us set out to do the jobs we find ourselves in. As I've mentioned, I thought I was going to do reference and instruction. So that's the background of my formal library education. It's definitely true that I apply some of those skills to my current job, but I don't have, direct schooling in what I'm doing now. And so piggybacking on that is the fact that from what I've seen, library schools don't have a track devoted to electronic resources like they do for other specialties. So even if you set out to do this kind of work, it's possible that while in school, you won't get any theoretical or practical training specific to it. And there are also so many components that you learn on the job, and every library uses different tools. There's different ILSs, different authentication systems, different discovery, different workflows, and on and on. I'm not really even sure how feasible it would be for library schools to teach this. So furthermore, the scope of the job is just so big. Every electronic resources job I've ever seen every job posting I've ever seen has referenced the need for, like my date out of order, for these skills and expectations in some way. There's the e-resources life cycle, and you have to know that it is circular and complicated. There's licensing and contract speak, how licensing affects sharing, archival rights, perpetual rights, ILL, copyright, which users have access and where. There's budget and encumbrances, there's pricing structures, there's counter and sushi and usage statistics, what usage statistics mean, how to analyze them, their significance and relevance to the library and its stakeholders. There's acronyms in general, so many acronyms to be aware of. And chances are your institution is awash in its own use of acronyms. So there's that learning curve also. Additionally, there are new and emerging trends and technologies like Counter 5, which I'm considering it new. It's a few years old, but not all vendors have made the switch to Counter 5. Some vendors are simultaneously running 4 and 5. And, you know, knowing what to use and how to compare them can be pretty challenging. There's also transformative agreements, open access, open source, everything, journals to electronic resources management systems. And of course, you have ILS administration, proxy and authentication, link resolvers, knowledge bases, electronic resources management, and discovery. So it's a lot, and it doesn't even count the soft skills and even some of the hard skills that are needed, like being able to navigate the many various platforms and admin sites, the need for good communication skills, both written and oral, which includes the ability to talk to different groups, from users to colleagues to library administration to vendors. All of the managements, the file management, the project management, the people management need to be flexible, have an interest in learning, negotiation skills, perhaps most importantly, a sense of humor. And since I just mentioned negotiation, I want to take a moment to offer my pro tip about negotiation to you all, and that is to just ask. It has been my experience that vendors would much rather keep your business than not be willing to come to an agreement that benefits both parties. Due to my aforementioned tendency toward introversion, I was super nervous the first time I asked a vendor to cut me a deal, but now I have mostly overcome my nervousness and I feel powerful when I negotiate, like honestly. So in addition to all of that, you have to juggle so many moving parts and different expectations from various groups. There are 2 external groups that have a lot of influence on what electronic resources librarians do, and they have distinct needs and expectations. The first is the library, which I'm going to personify and refer to as a unit. The library's expectation is that content is available when it's purchased. Ideally, subscription agents and publishers will know if a journal's publication has been suspended, or if your library's buying a book package. It's nice if the majority of the publications are actually published and not still works in progress. That has actually happened to me. It may have happened to you as well. In my case, it took many emails and phone calls to the publisher to make them aware of the problem and find a resolution to it. There's an expectation that we'll receive quality MARC records. Cleaning up hundreds or thousands of records, even with editing software, can be very tedious. We have an expectation that vendors and publishers will communicate platform and other changes, like if they're bought by another company or when packages change. And then an expectation that they communicate to other vendors. So if there is an easy proxy stanza update, if URLs change in your knowledge base, etc. And then next we have the patrons, who have a different, although related, set of expectations. In the world of the internet, which is the 24/7 world, being able to navigate and use the library website or catalog or databases is imperative. They want it to be easy. They want links to go nearly directly to the requested resource, but there's not a lot of clicking around. The library has what it says it has, that we don't have holding set on things we don't have, that knowledge-based dates are accurately reflecting coverage. There are, tied up in all of this, a few expectations that simply can't be met, but the library has everything, and the library has everything, and it is available now. So all of those things, the library's expectations combined with patrons' expectations, plus what is expected of the electronic resources librarian, it can feel a little bit to me like this. Just endless going up that hill. Some phrases I've read about electronic resources management are that it is an albatross, that the work is putting out fires instead of doing fire prevention, that it is chaos, that it is difficult and time consuming. And then my personal favorite one is this article called "The Unbearable Insecurity of the Electronic Resources Librarian." But never fear, there are ways for electronic resources professionals to connect and get training. Some of these are kind of old school ideas, but some weren't options when I started working with electronic resources. First is one of the older of the old school, the listservs. We use Sierra and Summon at my library, so I use both of those lists. I've mentioned Easy Proxy a few times because I manage the config file for my library. So I follow that list. Another pro tip I have on that tip is that it's often quicker to turn to the list if you're having access problems than it is to go to the vendor directly, which is not a dig at all, but the vendors are fielding problem tickets from libraries all across the world. And chances are with the listserv, though, there's another librarian who subscribes to the list who's had the same problem you've had and is available to answer your question much faster. That doesn't work though, definitely do put in a ticket with the vendor. But also, even if your library isn't using any of the products I mentioned, I bet there's an online forum for what you are using. ALA Core listserv is one that I come back to a lot. Core is a relatively recent combination of the ALA divisions, ALCTS, LIDA, and LLAMA. And they frequently host e-forums on different topics, which is a continuation of the e-forums that ALCTS used to do. Recent discussions have been about things like change in workflow, leadership and stewarding the talents of others, assessment, developing mentorship programs. The beauty of these forums is that you can engage with them as you have time. You can also get a peek at what other libraries are doing. Plus, if somebody has a really good idea that they've shared, or if you have an answer to a question, you've got their contact information right there and you can email them directly. I also use the ERIL listserv a lot, which is sponsored by Electronic Resources and Libraries. I know that there are a number of vendors on this list, so it's a good way to get announcements, get contact information, find out about other access issues. And there was also on that list a discussion over the summer about how to onboard new librarians. And one person shared a glossary of technical services terms, and someone else shared a link to an e-resources management handbook that is open access. And I wasn't aware of either of those resources personally, but they're both bookmarked on my computer now. Plus, as we're doing more cross-training and adding responsibilities to portfolios at my library, it's cool to have these sites available as we develop our own materials. Yes, there is I was talking about ERIL, and I actually, at the end of this presentation, I have a list of things that I mention but aren't linked like in the body of the presentation. So you'll get to see that in a little bit. Next one I want to bring up is Twitter, which, you know, for better or worse these days, there's Twitter to turn to. It is obviously a good way to network with other librarians. And I honestly use it more for checking up on outages. that your library might be experiencing. So like sometimes if a system goes completely down, the vendor is not able to send out any service alerts, but they can definitely tweet about it. And sometimes if Amazon Web Services has a problem, that will affect like half of the internet, including library related websites. Professional development opportunities are awesome if your budget allows for it. I love going to in-person conferences. I said loved, but you know, in the COVID times, maybe past tense is more appropriate. The Electronic Resources and Libraries Conference, which I mentioned in conjunction with the ERIL listserv, is my favorite. It is in Austin, Texas every March, and it's not huge, but it is a great place to meet people and observe what others are doing and learn and network, having one-on-one meetings with sales reps. There's an all virtual option now that's been great also as well. And with both in-person and virtual attendance, you have access to all of the recorded sessions. And also larger conferences like this one will usually have scholarship opportunities, especially for first-time attendees. Another, if your budget allows it, resource that I like is Library Juice Academy. Their course offerings are extensive. The time commitment is relatively low. I'm using some of my professional development funds this year to take a class in Excel and also to work towards a certificate in diversity and inclusion skills. Webinar participation can be budget dependent as well, but there are a lot of free and low cost options too. ACRL Choice, state library organizations like NCLA, which has a resources and technical services section, NC Live. Other library cooperatives and consortia and state libraries will often offer a wealth of training opportunities. And relatedly, I can't leave out regional organizations and library school conferences. They're often very low cost as well. The North Carolina Serials Conference is great, very affordable to attend. It's sponsored by the NC Central University School of Library and Information Sciences. Also earlier this year, I virtually attended the New England Technical Services Librarians Conference, and it was great. And now I've found myself on their mailing list and I can keep up on other trainings that they're offering as well. Professional literature, great place to turn if you've got the time. I like library technology reports. The October issue, by the way, is called The Current Landscape of Electronic Resources Access Issues. So it's pretty timely for some of the stuff we're talking about. ALA has published books about library technologies and electronic resources management. There are journals specifically about what we do as well, like Electronic Resources Librarianship, the Serials Librarian, and Serials Review. And as I kind of alluded to already, this is an area that personally, if I get overwhelmed with other things, this is not my priority. But it's there, it exists, it's excellent. I just sometimes don't have the time to devote to it. Getting into some of the newer technologies, YouTube is great if you are looking for free conferences. Also, there's training videos on YouTube. I have a colleague who worked in technical services at a very tiny library with very limited staff, and she actually taught herself how to do parts of her job by looking at YouTube tutorials. Additionally, there are lots of LibGuides that are coming online with tutorials and how-tos, especially since COVID. Some vendors even put out LibGuides for how to use their products. So things are very Googleable these days. And then probably the oldest school of all the training resources that would be Talking. If schedules allow, I would recommend setting up a Zoom meeting to do an informational interview with somebody you want to learn from. Can't promise that's always doable, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And then talking to your coworkers can be very beneficial. Find out what they need, what students and faculty are saying, Recently, a colleague from my department and I had a meeting with colleagues in the library's academic research and engagement department about a potential research project. And out of that, we came up with an idea for an informal collections coffee chat where we can learn more about what's going on in public facing departments and others can learn more about what goes on in our department. So I see this as an opportunity to demystify my job and foster greater transparency about things like the budget and how collections decisions are made. So on a more personal note, there are two other things that I would like for you to remember. Recognize that this is going to take time. It's going to take time to adjust to your job. It can easily take a year or even longer. Once you get adjusted, yes, I'll put those in the chat later. Once you get adjusted, things are going to change. It's just the nature of the job. It can be frustrating, but I think it also keeps things kind of fun and interesting and spicy. And then most importantly, realize it will not be perfect. I had a former supervisor once tell me that if 80% of your electronic resources are working the way they should, count that as a victory. I tend to be a little bit of an overachiever. So in other places in academia, that's a low B. So that hurt a little bit, but there's just too many things that can happen that are just out of the most diligent electronic resources librarians' hands. 80% is a really good goal. So my goal for this session has been to have an informal and participatory conversation about electronic resources. I am but one person with her own experiences. So I would like to take a little bit of time to ask you all to share any advice, tips, tricks that you've learned on the job. Feel free to offer your suggestions in chat, or if you'd like to ask, just go ahead and turn on your mic and let's have a talk.
Sarah, we also have that poll that we put together. Do you want me to launch that as well? No. Okay.
My first question is, can I be heard?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. I have a new headset that's squishing my head. But that is the price I pay to be heard, I guess. I have a very archaic question, I guess, in a bit. But I'm brand new, and my first foray into this library is to take care of their print serials. Is anyone still using a serials module in their ILS system? And
We
if
do.
so, yeah, what is your experience with that?
We use it. I actually, I have a serials specialist who reports to me, and honestly, she does most of that. If you have any like more specific questions about that, I would be happy to connect you with her because she is super knowledgeable and very helpful. I am just not the best resource for that, actually.
Gotcha. Yeah, that would be great, actually. So,
Okay, great. I will get the list of participants from Devin maybe later, and we can figure it out.
okay, I'll put it in the chat too if
Okay,
you're
that
going to
sounds
keep
great,
track of
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Getting some really good suggestions here in the chat. Connecting with other electronic resources librarians in the area is very helpful. Yes, absolutely agree. Talking to those in your role at other institutions. Yes, for sure. All the links in your library for every article book will not always work, so don't beat yourself up over it. Precisely, I absolutely agree with that. And you know, part of the spiciness of our job, right, is being able to figure out what's not working. So you know, not only should you not beat yourself up for it, but then you get yourself a little activity to investigate. Yes, Jimmy, thank you. That is an excellent point. I do that too. Jimmy says that they troubleshoot remote access using the phone by disconnecting from library Wi-Fi and trying the database. It looks like I'm slacking off when I do this, so I often explain to other staff. Yeah, my library, my office is on the corner of a very busy intersection in my work area. And so people will often see me on my phone and I'm like, no, I'm not playing games. I'm like troubleshooting right now. Yes, create a macro for the phrase, have you cleared your cache? Yeah, I will often get a ticket and say, like, I'm sorry, this sounds so basic, but could you just try this? Because that is so often the thing that they have to do, and that saves me from getting too deep in the weeds trying to figure out what's going wrong. Yes, horrendous mark records for some vendors. Free records aren't always great. Yes, always use Chrome. Agreed. Yeah, these are awesome. I love it. Thanks, you guys. Okay. I don't see any more filtering in. Learn how to troubleshoot, to isolate problems one step at a time. Yeah, absolutely. Favorite access strategies? That's a good question. Yep. First, always repeat the search. When I repeat the search, I will also go and like use serial solutions. So I go and check the link in there and see if that link is giving me access. And we also use a serials agent. So if it's something that we get through the agent, I will go and like look at what our access is supposed to be there. You know, some of the listservs I mentioned, like the easy proxy, if it's an authentication thing, that's a great place to look. You know, Glenn, I would be happy to talk to you more about like my best practices, or my not best practices, but the steps that I follow. If you'd like. Teach colleagues about the importance of permalinks and check to make sure their issue isn't related to using a top URL. Yes, and to highlight that, that is also important for your usage statistics. Permalinking it is important for that, because even if it's not a URL related thing, like if an instructor is just putting a PDF of something in their course module, and not the permalink to it, you are not getting a usage statistic for it. So permalinking has multiple values. Yes, build good relationships with public service and reference librarians, also important, especially like if you're dealing with budget cuts. You know, having a good relationship with them and being able to talk about resources that you are considering cutting in their discipline areas. Having a good relationship is really beneficial in that situation.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you find that it's better to troubleshoot first for a technical problem with the access, or do you find that it's better to research first if it's something that's actually being subscribed to or has been purchased? I mean, so like an acquisitions angle first, or is that always secondary?
It's kind of dependent on what the person reports that they're seeing. You know, if they're seeing like you know, one of those indicators on a database, like a shopping cart or a red dot or a lock, you know, something that's showing like no access, that would make me go acquisitions. If it's like a 404 message, or, you know, something I've seen lately is like header capacity is too large or something like that, like I will absolutely go technical 100% at that time. And go with like a browser cache clearing, and see if that helps resolve it. So it just depends on what you and the user are both seeing, I think.
Thanks.
So some other helpful tips and tricks: lean on your consortium support in addition to vendor support. Absolutely. You can get some great trainings, connections with other people in your consortium that way. Question about easy proxy to Open Athens was not for me. Created a LibGuide for e-resources after answering the same questions over and over. Yes, documentation is critical. Thank you for sharing your LibGuide, Ellie. And now Chris is saying, I was thinking about creating a status page for our library too. Is it automatically loaded or manually? If manual, how often do you need to? I will jump in and say we have a system status page that is updated manually. If that's not the question, I'm sorry, but we do, if there are outages, we do have a page where we will report websites being down. Can you talk about how you gather your statistics in Counter 5? Yes, so we actually have a product called LibStats, which is a WT Cox product. And with that, it just, you gather your sushi credentials for the vendors that offer them. And then the company loads them in, and then your statistics are harvested regularly, and you could go in and press some button and get stats. Not everybody has sushi, so there I still do a lot of like, I have a spreadsheet of vendors with login credentials, and so I do a lot of just logging in. That was my reference to the navigating admin sites and platforms before, was because I do a lot of logging in and just running reports that way. And then I have a gigantic folder called stats that where I keep everything. So, yes, WT Cox is the vendor, and it's called LibStats.
Thank you. And I love the name of your spreadsheet.
Okay. So now, and unmute myself, I guess, since the suggestions are filtering out, but I do thank you all again for participating. That was a great discussion, and your hints and tips and tricks were all very valuable. So Devin did share with me a few questions that were submitted during registration. So I do want to specifically address those now. And the first one was, I'm the only librarian here, did not specialize in systems admin. I need all the help I can get. I would say if you're here today, you are taking a positive step toward getting help. I hope some of the resources I've shared will be beneficial, and you've been able to identify some people that you can network with. You can include me as one of those people. I'd be happy to help out anybody who has any questions or just wants to talk electronic resources. The next question is, how do you stay organized in your job? I am married to my calendar. It rules my life. I really recently started color coding it, which has been a game changer. It's been amazing. I have a lot of committee work that I'm doing this year and have so many meetings and just other standing meetings also. So just being able to kind of like quickly glance at my calendar and see what's coming up, because I kind of like vaguely remember what color I've assigned to everything, is really super beneficial. I really like Microsoft To Do. That is an app that is part of the Microsoft suite. I even use it for non-work lists now. And that app actually integrates with Outlook, so you can see your tasks in both places. And what really helps me sometimes just kind of stay organized and focused is if I really need it, I will close out the email, I will close out the Teams, and just focus on what I need to get done. And then the last question was, I just started in this role. Please let me know about best practices. Again, cannot emphasize enough just to please document your workflows, your vendor contacts, your passwords. If you can keep them in a shared drive or site, that's awesome. I don't want anybody here to get hit by the proverbial bus, but you know, in the case that other people need to have access, keeping it in a place where people can access it is paramount. Beyond that, I don't know that I'm really comfortable offering any hard and fast best practices that'll be universally applied. Talking to your team and finding out what best practices already exist would be a good step. Document them. Don't be afraid to suggest changes. I think that, you know, even best practices can change, and it's a good idea to keep an eye to the future. So I'm going to start wrapping things up now. I want to be sure to mention the NASIG core competencies for electronic resources librarians. Before we do that, I would like to do a quick poll to see how many people have heard of the core competencies. Okay, interesting. So almost a split, but more saying no than yes. So I think if you review it, they're really interesting. And I think that I think that there's a reason why the list includes a section about personal qualities. Some of them make me laugh. So I wanted to share them with you today. Thank you, Devin. And this is in the seventh, the last section of the core competencies, which the core competencies are something like 10 or 11 pages long. But flexibility, open-mindedness, and the ability to function in a dynamic, rapidly changing environment. Flexibility is a crucial cognitive and effective attribute that operates on multiple levels. Within a single day, an electronic resources librarian may prioritize between various shifting tasks. Over the course of several years, the electronic resources librarian needs to be responsive to changing systems and user needs, and their technical expertise often gives them the ability to influence the library's strategy for responding to these factors. The next is a high level of tolerance for complexity and ambiguity. This is one of the ones that makes me laugh. Many aspects of electronic resources work require the ability to recognize familiar patterns and also identify exceptions to the pattern, such as selecting the correct holding in an e-resources knowledge base or troubleshooting an access outage. The third one is provides excellent customer service to a diverse population of users through a variety of communication methods. And this one has actually been updated in the last few years, because it used to read, unrelenting customer service focus and dogged persistence in the service of users, which that's just aspirational, like no way, impossible. And then the final one is skillful time management. Much electronic resource work is very time sensitive. An electronic resources librarian must demonstrate the ability to plan and manage their own time and work assignments and that of supervised staff in order to make and meet deadlines consistently. So, but seriously, like in addition to providing a bit of amusement, periodically reviewing this list reminds me of how my personality is well suited for electronic resources work. I have a feeling if you're doing this, yours is as well. And it also reminds me why I like my job. So I want to thank everyone again for your time and participation. I made it through this with my former dean here in the room. That was, hi Patty, that was a little nerve-wracking. We do have, I think, some time for questions. So I know we already have some participation, but if anything else has come up that you want to talk about or ask about, again, chat, turn on your mic. Be happy to talk some more.
What I'll do as well is create a shared Google Doc for the session so that folks can add anything that was mentioned in the chat. I'll add things as much as I can. And then also just some of the links from the PowerPoint as well.
Yeah, and then this is that page I mentioned earlier for things I mentioned, but I didn't link them previously. So there will be that for you as well.
Thank you for that list. I thought you said Library Goose Academy.
I mean, I would maybe be interested in Library Goose Academy too.
I did think that sounded pretty fun, but Juice is okay too.
Yes. All right, well, this has been a pleasure. I thank you all. Here's my contact information. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah.